The lights of Hollywood often blind us to the real human beings behind the silver screen. Behind the action hero we've come to know, Liam Neeson carries a story of profound love and devastating loss that has shaped his life in ways few could imagine. What happens when the man who rescues everyone on screen couldn't save the person who mattered most? How does someone rebuild a life shattered by unexpected tragedy? The journey of this renowned actor through the darkest valleys of grief and his eventual emergence into a new chapter of life contains lessons for us all about the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring power of love. If this story of remarkable courage and resilience in the face of overwhelming grief touches your heart, please consider subscribing to our channel for more inspiring true stories that reveal the humanity behind our cultural icons. Your support allows us to continue sharing these meaningful narratives that connect us all. To understand the depth of what Liam Neeson lost, we must first understand the exceptional lives that both he and Natasha Richardson led before their fateful meeting. Born in Ballymena, County Antrim, Northern Ireland on June 7, 1952, Liam Neeson grew up in modest circumstances during a turbulent time in Irish history. His father was a caretaker at a local primary school, and his mother was a cook. From these humble beginnings, young Liam would forge an unexpected path toward international acclaim. His first passion wasn't acting but boxing. From ages 9 to 17, Neeson developed into a promising amateur boxer, winning several regional championships. The discipline, physical rigor, and mental toughness he developed in the ring would later serve him well in his action roles, but more importantly, in facing life's harshest blows. Neeson stumbled into acting almost by accident when he was 24. A teacher at Queen's University Belfast invited him to audition for a play, and something clicked. He abandoned his university studies in physics and computer science to join the Lyric Players Theatre in Belfast, where he performed for 2 years. This decision marked the beginning of a slow but steady rise in the world of theater and film. Meanwhile, across the Irish Sea, Natasha Richardson was born into British theatrical royalty on May 11, 1963. As the daughter of actress Vanessa Redgrave and director Tony Richardson, and the granddaughter of actors Sir Michael Redgrave and Rachel Kempson, Natasha had theater in her blood. Her maternal aunt, Lynn Redgrave, and uncle, Corin Redgrave, were also accomplished actors. Growing up in such an illustrious family created both opportunities and challenges for Natasha. The doors of the theatrical world were open to her, but so too was the pressure to live up to the Redgrave legacy. Rather than shying away from the comparison, Natasha embraced her heritage while determinedly carving her own distinct path. She trained at London's Central School of Speech and Drama and made her professional debut on stage in 1983 in The Seagull, performing alongside her mother. By the late 1980s, she had established herself as a formidable talent in her own right, winning the London Drama Critics Circle Award for Most Promising Newcomer for her performance in High Society. In 1990, at 27, she married producer Robert Fox, a relationship that would last until 1992. The dissolution of this first marriage coincided with a period of professional growth as she continued to build her reputation in theater and began making more significant inroads in film. As Liam and Natasha separately built their careers throughout the 1980s and early 1990s, they occasionally moved in similar professional circles but had never properly met. Liam had relocated to Hollywood and was slowly making a name for himself with roles in films like Excalibur, The Bounty, and The Mission. He had a high-profile relationship with Helen Mirren, whom he met on the set of Excalibur, but remained unmarried by the time fate would bring them together. Both were established actors with substantial bodies of work, but were still several steps away from the peak fame they would later achieve. They were mature artists who had experienced both success and setbacks, both love and heartbreak. Perhaps the perfect foundation for the profound connection they would form. The Broadway stage has long been known as a place where magic happens, and in 1993, during a revival of Eugene O'Neill's Anna Christie, an especially powerful magic was at work. Liam Neeson was cast as the rough-hewn sailor Matt Burke, while Natasha Richardson played the title role of Anna, a former prostitute seeking redemption. The chemistry between them was immediately apparent to everyone involved in the production. Their on-stage romance carried conviction and intensity that drew rave reviews. The New York Times critic wrote that Neeson and Richardson generate enough steam to fog your eyeglasses, not realizing that what audiences were witnessing was not merely exceptional acting, but the beginning of a real-life love story. Behind the scenes, their relationship developed with a quiet intensity. Natasha was still technically married to Robert Fox, though they had separated. Professional ethics initially kept Liam and Natasha's interactions within appropriate boundaries, but the undeniable connection between them grew stronger with each performance. It was not love at first sight. Neeson would later admit in interviews. It was something much deeper that grew between us. It was like we'd known each other all our lives. This sense of recognition, of finding someone who somehow feels like home despite being a new presence in your life, would become the foundation of their relationship. Natasha herself described their connection as something that caught her completely off guard. Working with him, what happened between us, and that becoming public knowledge in conjunction with my marriage falling apart was kind of bad timing, she once told the Daily News. So what can I say? Obviously, I fell very much in love with him. There was a moment during a run of the play that would later take on almost mythic significance in the retelling of their love story. Liam sent Natasha a birthday card that read simply, "You're catching up with me. Lots of love, Oscar." It was signed with the name of his character from Schindler's List, which he was preparing to film. According to Neeson, the seemingly casual note triggered something in Natasha. She approached him and with characteristic directness asked, "That's it? That's all you have to say to me?" That bold challenge pushed their relationship into new territory. Liam would later recall, "I'm glad she did that. It was as if she said, 'Look, I'm not going to mess around here.'" This combination of vulnerability and strength, of patience and decisive action, characterized their approach to love. Neither rushed headlong into romance, yet neither shied away from the powerful connection they felt. They entered their relationship with the maturity of two people who had lived enough to know genuine love when they found it. After Anna Christie concluded its run, Natasha finalized her divorce from Robert Fox, and their relationship blossomed into a full-fledged romance. In 1994, almost exactly a year after they first worked together, Liam and Natasha were married in a private ceremony at their newly purchased farmhouse in upstate New York. The setting for their wedding reflected the kind of life they intended to build together, away from the glare of Hollywood, grounded in nature, prioritizing intimacy over spectacle. Family members and close friends gathered to witness their union, a celebration marked by genuine joy rather than industry networking or publicity considerations. Their wedding marked the beginning of a partnership that would blend their personal and professional lives in the most fulfilling ways. They would occasionally work together again, most notably in the 1998 film Nell, but their greatest collaboration would be the family life they created together. The newlyweds quickly set about building a family together, welcoming their first son, Michael, in 1995, followed by Daniel in 1996. Parenthood brought new dimensions to both their lives, but especially to Liam's. For a man who had spent his early career playing tough, sometimes troubled characters, fatherhood revealed wells of tenderness and commitment that transformed his sense of purpose. "Family is everything," he would often say in interviews, even as a star rose in Hollywood with breakthrough roles in films like Schindler's List, which earned him an Academy Award nomination, and mainstream success in Star Wars, Episode 1 as Qui-Gon Jinn. These professional triumphs were meaningful to him primarily as means to provide security for his family rather than as ego-gratifying achievements. Natasha, meanwhile, balanced her own successful career with motherhood, winning a Tony Award for her performance in the musical Cabaret on Broadway in 1998. Her approach to parenting was hands-on and heartfelt. Friends remarked on how she created family traditions, from elaborate birthday celebrations to holiday rituals, that gave their sons a sense of stability amid the unpredictable rhythms of their parents' acting careers. Their parenting philosophy blended their different cultural backgrounds, his Irish Catholic upbringing and her British theatrical heritage, into an approach that valued education, creativity, and moral character. Both were determined that their children would grow up grounded despite their privileged circumstances and the potential pitfalls of having famous parents. Together, they created a transatlantic life, with homes in Manhattan and Millbrook, New York, as well as frequent time spent in London. This arrangement gave their children both American and European cultural foundations, exposing them to different worldviews and experiences. They enrolled the boys in regular schools rather than exclusive institutions, wanting them to interact with children from diverse backgrounds. Despite the demands of two high-profile careers, they prioritized their family life, often making professional sacrifices to ensure one parent was always available for the children. Liam would later recall how they would coordinate their schedules. One of us would always be with the boys. We'd never both be away working at the same time. This commitment extended to maintaining privacy for their family. While both were recognizable public figures, they were selective about which aspects of their lives they shared with the media. They rarely brought their children to premieres or industry events, creating a protective bubble within which Michael and Daniel could develop their own identities separate from their parents' fame. Friends described them as a couple who genuinely enjoyed each other's company, a rarity in the entertainment industry where relationships are often strained by distance, competing egos, and the pressures of public scrutiny. They were known to prefer quiet evenings at home or small gatherings with close friends over the glamorous party circuit that dominates much of Hollywood social life. They were each other's best friend. Director K-19, the Widowmaker director Catherine Bigelow once observed, "You'd see them together, and it wasn't about performance or status. They just lit up around each other." Liam often spoke of his admiration for Natasha's passionate approach to life. "She would light up a room," he said. "She had this energy about her, this zest for living that was contagious. When Natasha believed in something, a role, a cause, a friend, she was all in 100%. Her enthusiasm balances more reserved, contemplative nature." Natasha, in turn, provided Liam with unwavering support through both professional triumphs and disappointments. When critics were harsh, or when a film underperformed, she remained a steadfast champion. "She always believed in me, sometimes more than I believed in myself," he would later reflect. Their differences complemented each other beautifully. His quiet strength provided a steady foundation for her more effervescent personality. Her social ease helped draw out the more private Neeson at industry functions where networking was necessary. He admired her theatrical training and often sought her advice on roles and performances. They found common ground in their shared Celtic heritage. Her grandfather was from Ulster, their love of literature and poetry, their commitment to certain charitable causes, and their preference for rural landscapes over urban environments. Their Millbrook farm became a sanctuary where they could escape the pressures of Hollywood and simply be a family. As their children grew and their careers evolved, their partnership deepened. The initial romantic attraction matured into something richer and more complex. A partnership of equals who had weathered life's ups and downs together and emerged stronger for it. They had created not just a marriage, but a shared world, populated with memories, inside jokes, mutual friends, and 1,000 small rituals that bind a family together. By early 2009, they had been married for nearly 15 years, raising two boys who were then entering adolescence. Liam, at 56, was enjoying a career renaissance with the unexpected success of Taken, which transformed him into an action star. Natasha, at 45, was balancing theater work with film roles and actively involved in various charitable endeavors, including AMFAR's fight against AIDS. Their life together seemed blessed. Successful careers, healthy children, a strong marriage, financial security, and the respect of their peers. Neither could have imagined how suddenly and completely this carefully constructed life would be shattered. The morning of March 16th, 2009, began like any other day. Natasha had traveled to Mont Tremblant, a picturesque ski resort in Quebec, Canada, for a short vacation with friends. It was meant to be a brief, rejuvenating getaway, a chance to enjoy the late winter snow before returning to work and family responsibilities. Liam was in Toronto, approximately 335 miles away, filming the thriller Chloe, directed by Adam McGoyan. The couple was accustomed to these brief separations necessitated by their careers, with regular phone calls keeping them connected until they could reunite. At Mont Tremblant, Natasha decided to take a beginner's skiing lesson on what was described as a bunny slope, an extremely gentle incline designed for novices. She was wearing a helmet, following proper safety protocols, and was accompanied by a professional instructor. By all accounts, the conditions were perfect. Clear visibility, well-maintained snow, and excellent weather. What happened next would be described by medical professionals as a devastating fluke, the kind of freak accident that defies all odds and expectations. During her lesson, Natasha took a minor fall, so minor that witnesses would later describe it as more of a tumble than a crash. She wasn't moving at high speed, didn't hit any obstacles, and didn't appear to strike her head with any significant force. It was exactly the kind of minor mishap that happens thousands of times daily on ski slopes around the world without consequence. Immediately after falling, Natasha was alert, communicative, and displayed no apparent signs of injury. She declined medical attention when the ski patrol arrived, signing a waiver and joking that she didn't need help. "I'm fine," she reportedly told both her instructor and the resort staff. "I just want to go back to my room and rest." This initial lucidity is characteristic of what medical professionals call the talk and die syndrome, associated with epidural hematomas. The injury creates a brief asymptomatic interval before compression of the brain begins to cause noticeable symptoms. Natasha returned to her hotel room, still showing no obvious signs of distress. It was only about an hour later that the first alarming symptoms appeared. She began complaining of a severe headache. Not just discomfort, but intense, escalating pain unlike anything she'd experienced before. Then came nausea and confusion, classic signs of increasing intracranial pressure. Her friends immediately called for an ambulance. By the time paramedics arrived, Natasha's condition had deteriorated dramatically. She was disoriented, struggling to maintain consciousness, and displaying clear signs of severe traumatic brain injury. She was first transported to the Centre Hospitalier Laurentien in St. Agathe, the nearest medical facility, where initial assessment confirmed the gravity of her condition. Doctors quickly realized she needed more specialized care than they could provide and arranged for a transfer to Hôpital du Sacré-Cœur de Montreal, a trauma center with advanced neurological capabilities. Meanwhile, Liam Neeson received a call that every spouse dreads. Accounts vary, but it appears the first call came from the ski resort, explaining that Natasha had been in an accident but was conscious and being taken to a local hospital as a precaution. Like many in such situations, Liam likely initially believed this was a relatively minor incident, perhaps a sprained ankle or mild concussion. As the gravity of the situation became clearer through subsequent calls, Neeson immediately left the Toronto film set, arranging for emergency transportation to Montreal. Friends described him as remarkably composed on the surface, but radiating an intense focus that suggested he was channeling all his energy into reaching his wife as quickly as possible. The journey from Toronto to Montreal, normally just over an hour by air, must have been excruciating. Every minute was stretched into what felt like hours, his mind cycling through scenarios ranging from hopeful to devastating, powerless to do anything but wait to reach her side. By the time Liam arrived at Sacré-Cœur Hospital, Natasha's condition had worsened significantly. Scans had revealed an epidural hematoma, bleeding between the skull and the brain's covering, the dura mater. This type of injury creates a rapidly expanding pool of blood that puts increasing pressure on the brain. Without immediate intervention, such pressure can cause irreversible brain damage and death. Surgeons had already determined that Natasha's brain had been without adequate oxygen for too long. The damage was catastrophic and irreversible. As a medical team worked frantically to stabilize her, family members began arriving. First, Vanessa Redgrave, Natasha's mother, who had been in New York when she received the news, then her sister, Jolie Richardson. What followed was a heartbreaking vigil. Though technically still alive, supported by ventilators and medication, medical professionals had made it clear that Natasha had suffered what is known as brain death, a complete and irreversible cessation of all brain functions. Recovery was not possible. For Liam, the man who had played so many strong, decisive characters capable of resolving any crisis, this was a situation where no amount of strength, will, or love could change the outcome. The helplessness must have been overwhelming. Sitting beside his vibrant, beautiful wife, now unresponsive to his touch or voice, machines maintaining only the most basic biological functions. As the reality of Natasha's condition became undeniable, Liam faced what was perhaps the most difficult decision of his life. Years earlier, in one of those hypothetical conversations couples sometimes have, Natasha had been explicit about her wishes should she ever be in a persistent vegetative state or brain dead. Just pull the plug she had told him. Like many actors and artists, the idea of existing as an empty shell, devoid of the personality and spirit that defined her, was anathema to her. Honoring those wishes while coming to terms with their finality presented an almost unbearable emotional challenge. Yet amidst his grief, Liam demonstrated the same integrity and strength of character that had defined both his career and his partnership with Natasha. After consulting with medical experts who confirmed the irreversibility of her condition, and with the support of family members who had gathered at the hospital, the decision was made to remove life support. This would allow Natasha to die with dignity, surrounded by those who loved her, rather than being maintained indefinitely in a state she had explicitly said she would not want. Before this final step was taken, however, arrangements were made for organ donation. Natasha had registered as an organ donor, a decision consistent with her generous spirit and desire to help others. Despite the trauma to her brain, her other organs remained viable and could save or improve the lives of multiple recipients. On March 18, 2009, surrounded by her husband, mother, sister, and other family members, Natasha Richardson was removed from life support. She passed away peacefully at the age of 45, leaving behind her husband of nearly 15 years and their 2 teenage sons, aged 13 and 12. The official cause of death was listed as blunt trauma to the head, resulting in an epidural hematoma. Medical experts would later explain that what made Natasha's case so rare was not just the minor nature of the fall that caused it, but the rapid progression from seemingly fine to irreversibly injured. The tragedy garnered international attention, not only because of the Richardson-Redgrave family's prominence in the entertainment world, but also because of the shocking nature of the accident. That someone could die for what appeared to be such a minor fall challenged people's sense of safety and predictability, reminding everyone of life's fragility. In the immediate aftermath, as news of Natasha's death spread, tributes poured in from across the theatrical and film communities. Broadway theaters dimmed their lights in her honor, a traditional tribute reserved for those who had made significant contributions to the stage. Colleagues shared memories of her warmth, talent, and professionalism. Friends spoke of her infectious laugh, her devotion to her family, and her passionate approach to both life and art. For Liam and their sons, however, the public outpour was likely a distant concern compared to the private devastation they were experiencing. They returned to New York, where arrangements were made for a wake at the American Irish Historical Society and a private funeral at St. Peter's Episcopal Church in Millbrook, close to their country home. The funeral was attended by family and close friends from the entertainment world, including Ralph Fiennes, Alan Rickman, Laura Linney, and Uma Thurman. Liam, supported by his sister Bernadette and close friend Aidan Quinn, maintained a stoic dignity throughout the service, his primary concern being the emotional well-being of his sons. Natasha was laid to rest in a cemetery near their Millbrook property, allowing her family to visit her grave without the intrusions they might face in a more public location. The choice reflected the family's desire to grieve privately, away from the media attention that had followed them since the accident. In the days and weeks that followed, as the immediate shock began to give way to the reality of loss, Liam and his sons faced the daunting task of rebuilding their lives without the woman who had been at the emotional center. The grief that followed was all-consuming. Liam later described it as hitting grief's bottom, a pain so profound it defied description. "It's like a wave. You just get this profound feeling of instability," he told Esquire magazine in 2011. "You feel like a three-legged table. Just suddenly the earth isn't stable anymore. And then it passes and becomes more infrequent. But I still get it sometimes." For a man known for his physical presence and emotional control on screen, these waves of destabilizing grief presented a particular challenge. How does one who has built a career partly on projecting strength navigate such profound vulnerability? How does a father help his children through a loss he can barely comprehend himself? In rare interviews where he discussed this period, Liam revealed that he threw himself into work almost immediately, not out of callousness, but survival. Just weeks after Natasha's funeral, he was on the set of Clash of the Titans, playing Zeus, the king of the gods. "I'm not good without work," he told Esquire. I just don't wallow too much, you know? And I just didn't want to, especially for my boys, seen to be wallowing in sadness or depression." This approach, channeling grief into action rather than allowing it to become paralyzing, reflected not just Liam's personal coping strategy, but also his determination to model resilience for Michael and Daniel. Whether consciously or not, he seemed to understand that his sons would take cues from him about how to process their own grief. Nevertheless, the pain would sometimes overwhelm him in unexpected moments. "There's periods now when I hear the door opening," he told 60 Minutes in 2014, 5 years after Natasha's death. "Especially the first couple of years. Anytime I hear that door opening, I still think I'm going to hear her." These moments of overwhelming grief didn't diminish with time in the way many expect. Instead, they became less frequent, but no less intense when they did occur. It hits you. It's like a wave. You just get this profound feeling of instability. The earth isn't stable anymore, and then it passes and it becomes more infrequent, but I still get it sometimes. For Michael and Daniel, losing their mother at such formative ages, 13 and 12, respectively, presented distinct challenges. Adolescence is already a time of identity formation and emotional turbulence. Navigating it while processing profound grief created additional layers of complexity. Michael, the older son, later admitted that he spiraled into self-destructive behavior for years afterward, unable to process his grief in healthy ways. "I spent years trying to get over it by drinking and partying, trying not to think about it," he told The Times in 2020. But that just delayed the inevitable. Eventually, you have to deal with it. In a touching tribute to his mother, Michael later changed his surname from Neeson to Richardson. "It was a way to honor her and keep her close to me," he explained. The decision reflected the profound impact Natasha had on her son's sense of identity and the ongoing nature of his relationship with her memory. Daniel, the younger son, processes grief more privately. Less is known about his journey, reflecting both his naturally more reserved personality and his choice to pursue a career outside the public eye. Friends of the family have described him as having Liam's quieter temperament, suggesting he may have internalized his grief in ways similar to his father. The practical aspects of becoming a single parent to grieving teenagers presented additional challenges for Liam. Simple family routines, meals, holidays, school events now carried the weight of Natasha's absence. Decisions that had once been shared now fell solely on his shoulders. Even celebrities with significant resources faced the logistical and emotional challenges of solo parenting. Liam worked to keep their family life as stable as possible while allowing space for all of them to process their loss in their own ways. He maintained their homes in both New York City and Millbrook, preserving the environments where the boys had grown up with their mother. He kept them in the same schools, surrounded by familiar friends and supportive adults who understood what they were going through. Extended family played crucial roles during this period as well. Vanessa Redgrave, despite her own grief at losing her daughter, provided grandmotherly support to Michael and Daniel. Liam's sister Bernadette visited frequently from Ireland, offering both practical help and emotional support. Friends from both the entertainment world and their private lives rallied around the family, creating a network of care. The public mourning was immense. The theater world, Hollywood, and fans worldwide expressed their shock and condolences. Tributes highlighted Natasha's talent, her generosity of spirit, and the terrible suddenness of her loss. But away from the public eye, a family was trying to navigate a new and unwanted reality where every day presented fresh reminders of absence. Grief doesn't follow a predictable timeline or a neat set of stages. For Liam and his sons, the years following Natasha's death were characterized by both intense pain and gradual adaptation. Not moving on in the sense of leaving her behind, but learning to carry her memory forward in a way that honored her life, while allowing them to continue their own. For Liam, the surreal nature of sudden loss meant that even years later, he would sometimes expect Natasha to walk to the door or pick up when he called their home. "There are periods now when I hear the door opening," he told 60 Minutes. "Especially the first couple of years. Anytime I hear that door opening, I still think I'm going to hear her." The practical aspects of becoming a single parent to grieving teenagers presented additional challenges. Liam worked to keep their family life as stable as possible while allowing space for all of them to process their loss in their own ways. He tried to be both mother and father to his sons, though he would often admit the impossibility of truly filling the void Natasha had left. "I'm all they have, so I need to be there for them," he told a close friend. This sense of responsibility became both anchor and purpose during his darkest days. When personal grief threatened to overwhelm him, The knowledge that his sons needed him provided the motivation to continue functioning. His approach to grief was largely private. Unlike some celebrities who might share their journey publicly through memoirs or interviews, Liam typically maintained a reserved dignity that had characterized his public persona long before tragedy struck. When he did speak about Natasha, it was with palpable love and respect. She was just the most generous, loving. She was a very, very generous woman, he told Anderson Cooper years later, his voice thick with emotion even after the passage of time. The present tense often slipped into his descriptions of her, reflecting how alive she remained in his heart and memory. Work became both refuge and necessity. In the years following Natasha's death, Liam's career entered a surprisingly prolific phase. The unexpected success of Taken in 2009 launched a new chapter in his professional life, establishing him as an action star in his 50s, an unusual trajectory in youth-obsessed Hollywood. The physical demands of these action roles provided an outlet for unexpressed emotion. After Natasha died, I threw myself into my work to try and numb the pain, he admitted years later. The physical aspect of those roles, the training, the fight choreography, it requires such focus that for periods of time, you can't think about anything else. This immersion in work served multiple purposes. It provided financial security for his family, gave structure to days that might otherwise have been consumed by grief, and offered temporary respite from emotional pain through physical exertion and mental focus. But work alone couldn't heal the deep wounds of loss. In time, Liam began to incorporate other coping strategies. He found solace in nature, spending time at their Millbrook property where memories of Natasha felt like a comfort rather than only a source of pain. He leaned on longtime friends who had known both him and Natasha, people with whom he could freely reminisce without explanation or context. Faith played a role as well. Raised Catholic in Northern Ireland, Liam had a complicated relationship with organized religion, but maintained a personal spirituality that helped him make sense of loss. "I was never particularly religious," he once said, "but tragedy makes you think about these things. What happens after we're gone, whether we'll see each other again." For the boys, the journey through grief was complicated by their stage of development. Adolescence is already a time of identity formation and emotional turbulence. Navigating it while processing profound grief created additional layers of complexity. Michael, the older son, later admitted that he spiraled into self-destructive behavior for years afterward, unable to process his grief in healthy ways. "I spent years trying to get over it by drinking and partying, trying not to think about it," he told The Times in 2020. But that just delayed the inevitable. Eventually, you have to deal with it. In a touching tribute to his mother, Michael later changed his surname from Neeson to Richardson. "It was a way to honor her and keep her close to me," he explained. The decision reflected the profound impact Natasha had on her son's sense of identity and the ongoing nature of his relationship with her memory. Daniel, the younger son, processes grief more privately. Less is known about his journey, reflecting both his naturally more reserved personality and his choice to pursue a career outside the public eye. Friends of the family have described him as having Liam's quieter temperament, suggesting he may have internalized his grief in ways similar to his father. One of the most profound aspects of this tragedy came in Natasha's final gift. As an organ donor, her heart, kidneys, and other organs gave life to others. Liam has spoken movingly about how knowing parts of her live on in others has provided a measure of comfort amid the loss. "She's keeping 3 people alive at the moment, her heart, her kidneys, and her liver," he said. "It's terrific, and I think she will be very thrilled and pleased by that." This knowledge, that even in death, Natasha continued to embody the generosity that characterized her life, offered a kind of continuity that helped the family find meaning in their loss. It aligned perfectly with who she had been, someone who gave freely of herself to others. Gradually, over months and years, what mental health professionals call integrated grief began to emerge. This doesn't mean the pain disappeared, but rather that it became possible to incorporate the reality of loss into a continuing life story, to hold both sorrow and joy, both memory and presence simultaneously. Finding meaning in the aftermath, honoring Natasha's legacy. In the years following Natasha's death, Liam gradually found ways to honor her memory through both his personal and professional choices. He became an advocate for organ donation awareness, speaking about how Natasha's decision had created something positive from tragedy and encouraging others to consider registering as donors. This advocacy was subtle rather than splashy, occasional mentions in interviews rather than high-profile campaigns, consistent with his general approach to public life. Yet the sincerity with which he spoke about the importance of organ donation undoubtedly influenced many who admired him. His career took on new dimensions as well. While he continued to work steadily in action films that showcase his physical prowess, the Taken sequels nonstop to Grey, he also took roles that allowed him to explore grief, loss, and resilience on screen. Films like Ordinary Love, where he played a husband supporting his wife through cancer treatment, seemed to draw on his own experiences of love and potential loss. His performance carried a lived authenticity that critics noted, with several mentioning that Neeson brought a depth of understanding to the role that transcended acting technique. In Silence, Martin Scorsese's meditation on faith and suffering, Neeson portrayed a Jesuit priest who questions his beliefs in the face of persecution, a role that allowed him to explore questions of meaning and purpose that often arise in the aftermath of personal tragedy. Even some of his action roles took on deeper resonance. In The Grey, Neeson played a man grieving his wife's death who must fight to survive after plane crash in the Alaskan wilderness. The film's exploration of the will to live in the face of overwhelming loss paralleled aspects of his personal journey. For their sons, the journey of growing up without their mother meant finding their own paths to healing while navigating transition to adulthood. Michael, after struggling through his late teens and early 20s, eventually found stability and purpose by following his parents into acting. In interviews, Michael has spoken about how working in the same industry helps him feel connected to his mother's legacy. "I think the arts and acting in film connect me to her," he told People magazine. "She never taught me any specific acting methods, but I've learned that the way I act and the way I approach the work is very similar to how she did it."